Hi, we're at the local farmers market here in Newberg, Oregon, and there's a recipe that I love making, everybody seems to really enjoy, and I cook it usually with shiitake mushrooms, but today we're going to do something great. We're going to cook it my favorite way. It's the same recipe, but instead of shiitake, we're going to add the Miatake and we're going to add the Chanterelle. You know, I tell people it's like the perfect combination because Chanterelle tends to be sweet, and then the Miatake just seems to have a really great texture. Miatake, when you first, you know, if you were just to taste it or not cook it enough, it's very, very bitter. But for some reason, when you cook it, all that bitterness just comes out, and the flavor is just amazing. So we're going to start by turning on the oven. And immediately after you do that, you add butter. As soon as you add the butter, you start adding your mushrooms. This will take about 10 minutes to cook all the way through, maybe a little less. The Miatake is great. It is very healthy for you, but to cook it, it seems to be the easiest, just to peel off. You can pretty much use the whole thing, you know, even this stuff at the end. Sometimes people ask, you know, as long as it's clean, you can use even like the end part. Matter of fact, sometimes I like it better that way. Again, this is Miatake. At the farm, we offer all kinds of different kinds of mushrooms. And so you can use this recipe interchangeably with whatever mushroom you like. But I think that this is my favorite. We're going to get a reaction from the people here at the farmers market, and we'll get an idea what they think. Usually they'll say how good it is, because it is a really good recipe. And sometimes you get more of the this is so good, and yum, this is good, you know, and oh yeah, it tastes pretty good. You know, it depends. So we'll get an idea if people like this recipe as well as I do. I'm going to move that and back to create a little more space. You know, I'm going to kind of peel this too. So people like to say, you need to wash your mushrooms? You know, it depends on, I suppose, how much it's touched. Generally, with most of our mushrooms, they're not even touched. A Chanterelle grows off the ground, and you know, a lot of times there's a little debris on them, so you want to get the debris off. But these are actually very clean. Chanterelles grow in Oregon most of the time, and they're in season in fall and sometimes early winter. But this is my favorite. These actually aren't in season quite yet, even though fall's coming right up, so it's just right around the corner. What I'm cleaning this with is colloidal silver spray. It's what it is. It's a water that has a disinfectant property. So just in case. And again, most of these are pretty clean. Like that one's superb. We sell these oftentimes in clamshells. They also sell by the pound. The clamshells, generally speaking, are 1/4 of a pound. And obviously, when you put, you use 2 clamshells, that's a 1/2 pound. And this particular recipe calls for a 1/2 pound. And of course, you can, cut the recipe in half, or you can double the recipe, whatever you want, depending on how many people there are. But usually, you know, for a family, just, you know, unless you're having a big party or whatever, cooking with a half a pound is really perfect. It's just enough. And if you're single by yourself, you know, you can obviously cook less, but if you do the half a pound, it's great the next morning to put in your microwave if you have leftovers, and put it over even your eggs. Especially chanterelle. Chanterelle they're great. They taste great in eggs. You can cook them in soup. What I'm particularly making though is a sauce. It's a sautéed sauce, so you can throw it over your meats. You can throw it over your pastas. You can just have them as a side, as an appetizer. Really? Okay. And it's just fine, you know, if you want to wash your mushrooms, it's just fine to wash it over your sink too. But I don't like to do that before the market. I like to do it right before I cook. I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit. So right now we have the butter and an entire half a pound of mushroom in here. Again, we have a chanterelle and Miatake. Next thing I do is I put in a 1/4 cup of wine. This, of course, is a half a cup, so I'm just going to measure it halfway. And, you know, it doesn't really have to be exact. When you cook stuff enough, you know whether or not you want it, you know, to be a little bit more buttery, a little bit more, you know, a little bit more of that wine sweet taste to it. This is one of those recipes, though, when I stick right on the recipe, it tends to be perfect, but varying a little bit is fine. There's garlic here, which I usually add, but because we only have 1 spoon here, I'm going to start with the dry spices. This is sweet basil. If you only have basil, that works, but I'd add a little sugar with it because that sweet taste does matter. So 2 teaspoons of sweet basil. This is curry. 3/4 of a teaspoon of curry. And again, I don't need to really do it exact, but I fill the spoon mostly up. And next is black pepper. And sometimes I'll add a little more pepper and people comment how spicy it is. So I try to, maybe you want just enough pepper, maybe a little less if you want to lean on the side of, you know, safety. So, okay, so what we got so far, again, we have a cube of butter, we have a 1/4 cup of wine. We have on our dry spices sweet basil, 2 teaspoons of sweet basil, 3/4 teaspoon of curry, and a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. And next and finally, garlic. And let's say last but not least, because anytime you cook mushrooms, it's a very popular opinion that you want to have butter and garlic, or oil and garlic. So this recipe calls for a tablespoon. What I do is I take this teaspoon and I just way overfill it. You almost can't have too much garlic, in my opinion. Garlic is so good for you too. Okay, this has been cooking for about 5 minutes, and we're going to cook it for another 5 minutes. I'll show you right now how it looks. It's hot. The sides are hot.